James, can you hear me?
Yes, perfect. Yes, perfect.
Yeah. Basically, good afternoon, everyone. Basically, my presentation is about a research project, okay, which we were doing with three other countries. It's about the use of lesson study with VET teachers, and I'm taking the perspective of how the PD program of this project changes from what I'm calling the script, which is the international dimension of the project, to the local performance, how it is adapted, how it is actually performed in a particular country. So let me start by, there seems to be, okay. So, this is the structure of the session. So I'll start soon by presenting myself, then I'll say something about lesson study, then something about the project I was mentioning, and that's in short, that is lesson study or VET. Then I will pass on to the data and its analysis, then the findings, which again, I am viewing from this perspective of international script local performance. Then I'll go for some reflections on the findings, and I will end with some arising questions. Now, basically, my background is I'm a trained primary school teacher and also as a mathematics teacher. So I started my career as a primary school teacher. I moved on to teaching then mathematics to students aged 11 to 18. And since 2008, I have been a teacher educator at the University of Malta, and my area is mathematics. Now, my areas, I lecture in assessment, obviously maths education, and teacher education. Now, I'm going to discuss, teacher education, because this links to lesson study. So in our faculty, we have a program which we call Clastum. You have the logo up there. James, who is moderating the session, is the team leader. So we are colleagues and friends as well. And basically, this program was launched in 2017. The idea is to promote and support lesson study in schools. Those of you who were this morning following James' presentation, he talked about doing lesson study with initial teacher education students. So we do this support with students who are still studying to become teachers, teachers in their first 2 years, that's the induction period in Malta, and then teachers who are continuing with their professional development. As a group, as Clastum, we participate in international projects, and we conduct research and publish research as well. And over there, you can have a look at our website. There's the link. Now, something about lesson study for maybe those of you who are not well acquainted with the idea. Basically, lesson study is a collaborative professional learning experience for teachers. It's about teacher learning, but the ultimate aim is student learning. So it's a process in which teachers work together, collaborate, but the ultimate aim is to help the students to improve their learning. This is something that originated in Japan, like 150 years ago, but moved on to the West maybe like 30 years ago, when people, especially from America, started writing, and once the English language got into lesson study, it became a word phenomenon. Lesson study is known for its teacher learning effectiveness. There are lots of research which shows how teachers learn through lesson study. As you can see, there is the word association of lesson study walls, and even the journal of the association. That is evidence of how global lesson study has become. Now, basically, I've been speaking about lesson study, but what is lesson study? There are different models, okay? But I'm going for maybe the most classic model of lesson study. Basically, it offers teachers, okay, the opportunity to identify an issue, something which interests them. It may not be a problem. It may be something that they want to explore further. It can be a problem as well. So they start working as a group. They identify an issue, and they start to research the issue. Now, by research, you can have different levels of research. One can read a book, read an article, see a video, do some courses and so on. So after the research, they start planning the lesson, and one of them would teach this lesson. And this lesson is referred to as the research lesson, the lesson that we are researching. Now, the rest of the group, and maybe some guests, will observe the lesson. They will observe the lesson. Usually they would have like an observation sheet. They take down notes, then they reflect. And after the lesson, there would be like a post-lesson meeting in which they discuss what they saw, what worked, what maybe worked less, and how to move forward. Now, over there, I mean, there's an important question, and this is particularly linked to this presentation. I mean, there are a number of steps, and I'm asking, how important is it to have all these steps? Now, this is something to keep in mind. I will come back to this question later on. Now, okay, this is the project I was referring to, okay? Now, this is the logo. This is the official name of the project, which I can never remember. It's too long for me. So I prefer to call it Lesson Study for VAT over there. So basically, it's an Erasmus Plus project. So it is funded by the EU. It ran from 2020 to 2023. Basically, we're closing the project. It will come to an end in this August. And you have the website over there. There are 4 partner countries: Hungary, which is the lead partner, then there is Austria, Malta, and the Netherlands. Now, in each country, you have 2 partners in each country. You would have a higher education institution. In our case, is the University of Malta. And then you would have a VAT school in each country. In our case, it is the Institute of Tourism Studies. Now, the aim of now this is one of the aims, but the general aim, okay, of the project is to adapt lesson study methodology to the VAT sector in order to improve the quality of VAT education. It's quite an ambitious aim, I would say. Something that is very new about this project is the link between lesson study and VAT. That's quite new. Now, I mean, as part of the project, we developed a number of modules, basically 5. 3 were supposed to be compulsory, the last 2 were optional. Unfortunately, we only managed as countries to make the first 2 with our teachers, okay? So it is module 1 and module 2. In Malta, we wrote module 3, which has not been used because of lack of time. In any case, let's focus on the 2 modules which were used. So module 1, it was developed by the Dutch team. It's about the theory of lesson study. And module 2, which was developed by the Austrians, it's about how you translate the theory into actual practices. So it's about the implementation of lesson study. Now I'm going back here. I'm introducing a very simple analogy. I'm going back to the title of my presentation. So it is from international script to local performance. So the analogy is here. Imagine you have a play. I believe this one is by Shakespeare years back, and there have been so many performances of the play. So you get a script which is performed. Now, so performances are quite, let's say, loyal to the original script. Some performances, for their own good reasons, the director, the producer, the actors, whoever they may be, decide to change. So when people change, I'm not taking a critical stance here. People change because they decide to do so. But that's the analogy. So moving from the play of Shakespeare to the performance, I'm saying, listen, a group of people designed an international PD program. Now, this was implemented locally in 4 countries in our case. Now, obviously, there were some differences. So we have the original script and then the performance. Now, 2 words that are very important to all PD programs and even more so to my presentation: adaptations and fidelity. Now, by adaptations is something that PD designers actually encourage teachers to do. What are adaptations? They are the changes that practitioners do to a PD program in response to their needs, to the demands of the context. But these changes are adaptations if they do not jeopardize the program's core principle. If they are doing something that goes completely against the core principles of the program, we can say they are changes, but they are not adaptations. Fidelity is linked to adaptations. It's about the degree to which a program was implemented as planned. So the closer the implementation is to the planning, the higher is the level of fidelity. Now, I mean, in Malta, this is a photo of one of the research lessons. Okay, I will show another photo later on. So we targeted participants who are involved in VAT education, mostly teachers. Okay, we did the piloting at the Institute of Tourism Study, which was our partner school during the scholastic year 21-22. We implemented the actual program with teachers from November 22 to March 23, and the delivery was blended, although, I mean, this was COVID time, or a good part of it, okay? So most of it was online. It involved synchronous and asynchronous meetings and even independent learnings. So we started with a group of 34 participants. Initially, we had 7 groups, and each group had around 4 to 6 participants. They were grouped either by school, so a group of teachers, they would form a group in a particular school, or by subject area. We get different teachers, different individuals from different schools. I mean, they have an interest in a specific area, and we group them together. Now, each group was supported by one of us. There were 4 members on this team. There was James, there was me, and 2 other colleagues. So each of this group were supported by one of us. Some of us had to cover all the courses. Now, this is interesting. The completion numbers were a bit different. So from the original 7 groups, we ended with 5 groups. From the original 34, we ended with 14 participants. And these were 11 teachers, 1 head of department, also with a teaching role, and 2 were education officers. Now, education officers in our system are people who are mostly involved in the development of the curriculum, teacher education, and so on. This presentation, the focus is on the 2 groups that I was leading. So I was leading 2 groups. This is the photo of another group. So the previous photo was Group A during the research lesson. This photo represents Group B during the research lesson. So Group A. So Group A, okay, consists of 3 people. There were 2 VAT teachers and 1 education officers. Initially, they were 5, but they ended up 3. They were not colleagues. They met specifically for this project. The lesson study was conducted in a school, a secondary school for girls aged 11 to 16. And the issue they decided to focus on was the difficulty in combining theory with hands-on activities. And the subject chosen was hospitality. In fact, the lesson they planned and implemented was about Mediterranean cuisine. Now, something interesting with this group, I mean, for the actual lesson, they invited a Turkish chef who happens to work in Malta, and he gave part of the lesson, okay? Now, Group B. Group B, they started as a group of 6, but they ended up 3. Now, they ended up 3 teachers, all from the same college. It's a post-secondary VAT institution, so this caters for students from the age of 16 onwards. These colleagues are from the Institute of Applied Sciences in their school, in their institution, and they identified the issue of the difficulty in linking chemistry principles to real-life situations. And their chosen lesson was about climate change. Now, I mean, the data, I mean, there was lots of data, and I mean, there were notes, which my personal notes, mostly informal, I must admit. We had videos of the online meetings. I mean, we had the notes that we took during the research lesson, because during the observation, a teacher is doing the lesson, the other members are observing and taking down notes according to an agreed grid, okay? So we had those. Then we had the post-lesson discussions, which was on Zoom. So we have the recording of that. Again, it was attended by the teachers and me. There were the tasks that were produced by the participants, because something that I should have mentioned, this PDP program was accredited by our university. So the students were required to do a number of tasks for this accreditation. And then finally, quite recently, maybe 3 weeks back, we had the closing event. And the groups made their presentation. So even the PowerPoint of the closing events are part of the data. Now, the data analysis, I mean, it's like a two-way thing. I mean, there's an element of self-study because I was so much involved and I was reflecting on what happened, what I did, what I could have done better, and so on. And there is always thematic analysis, okay? Now, the findings are on 3 levels. Now, first, there are the measures which the teachers did before the research lessons, the measures during the research lesson itself, and the measures after. Now this is, I think, the most crucial, the first one. And there's an asterisk up here because this is something that we discussed as a group. It was agreed as a group. The other things were things that they decided to do on their own. I was not consulted, they just did them, okay? Now, the first one was this. The actual modules, the first one and the second one, prepared by the Dutch and the Austrians, were very, very detailed. I mean, in the Dutch system, in the Austrian system, at least those participating in the project, the people involved were very much aware of what lesson study is. So they really went into the theory, much details. So we decided in Malta, being something quite, I mean, it was new for the practitioners and quite new for Malta as well. We decided to go for a diluted version of the module. This is something that I decided with my groups and we agreed. Now, something else they did. They completely, even though we diluted the modules, they still kept focusing on the doing of lesson study, the practice of lesson study, rather than the theory of. This is something that I resisted at first, but then it's like you have to move with the water as well. So it's like something that they ended up doing, focus on doing, not theory. I mean, they did the research during the planning, but then it disappeared. They did not use it when they wrote down the lesson. Something that is quite interesting, though we met regularly, especially during module 2, because module 1 was mostly independent learning. Module 2, we met every week for an hour. But they were both telling me we work better on our own. Don't be offended, but when they meet informally, they go to a coffee shop, I mean, they meet in the staff room, whatever, they work better, which is very interesting, I find. Now, during the lesson itself, 2 important things. There were moments when they did not stick to the agreed rows. Observers were supposed to be like discrete, looking at things that we had agreed upon and take down notes. But for instance, in group A, the 2 observers simply at one point, I mean, decided to join the students when they were doing work. And at one point, they were even helping them. In group B, something again that was not agreed, there was like co-teaching. The teacher was struggling with the lesson, so one of the other teachers simply went and helped out. In group B again, I mean, both A and B, even though they were supposed to write down the notes, I mean, they did not really give that much attention to the note taking. Now, after the research lesson, there was the post-lesson discussion. Even though we had like agreed on a number of questions, okay, and I was like pushing in that direction, their reactions were very like centered upon themselves in a way that really, I mean, what they were getting from the program, they were getting from collaboration, something which they were not experiencing before. I was trying to push them to discuss what happened during the lesson, what can be improved, which are important, but they wanted to go to a different level. So maybe an initial level, collaboration. Now, some reflections on the findings. Now, I'm taking these reflections from 2 perspectives, okay? From the perspective of the project and the lesson study, and from the teacher learning perspective. So, some measures were not adaptations because they jeopardized the core aim of the project, referring specifically to the theory and practice of lesson study. So I'm referring here mostly, in my opinion, it's about this the downsizing of the modules, and I was part of the decision, and even on the emphasis during collaboration, during the post-lesson discussion. Then, from the other perspective, the participants, so let me go back a bit. From this perspective, one would say it's a negative outlook. But, if we take the teacher learning perspective, the teachers collaborated, which for them was a new thing. So they were very excited about it, and they kept saying, we need to keep doing this. And there was teacher learning, maybe not what the project was anticipating or expecting, but still teacher learning. It's about lesson planning, for instance. It's about co-teaching and even the use of new technology. So from that perspective, I think it was a positive outlook. Now, some questions that arise from these findings. Okay, the fidelity of the program, how implemented in the performance in Malta, was a bit low. But is that necessarily a negative thing? This is something to think about, because I'm running a bit out of time, okay? So I'm just asking these questions at this point. The second question, is doing lesson study a question of doing everything or nothing? Do you remember the initial questions I asked? The steps, do we have to do all the steps? Can we leave some steps out, maybe focus on others? Can we do what I would like to call mini lesson studies, maybe focus on a very small aspect of the lesson, maybe the introduction, dealing with homework, questioning. And lastly, now this is something which we have to take on as PD organizers in Malta, both James and I, and our colleagues, and even colleagues in the other 3 countries. Does it make sense to expect teachers who are not accustomed to collaboration, not even to lesson study, to start this important experience with a full-blown lesson study? Would it have made more sense to start maybe a bit more slow? I mean, thanks for your attention. That's it.
Thanks a lot, Michael. It is a very interesting presentation. I read a lot to what Michael is saying. As Michael said, part of this project, that I was also leading 2 groups. And also my previous presentation earlier this morning, I emphasized the fact that the study is a very effective tool, but it's a very challenging process for teachers, particularly those who are not used to engage in certain processes like research, like observation, like detailed planning, like anticipating student learning. So all these different and difficult concepts make lesson study quite a challenging process, and that's my team will say. Any questions from the floor towards Michael's presentation? Yes.
So I know you talked a little bit about COVID, but how do you think that affected it?
Okay, Michael, how do you think that COVID affected maybe the way that you planned out these 2 modules with teachers?
And basically, COVID, really hit hard during the initial part of the project, because then, when we were doing module 2, we were actually meeting face to face. We were going to schools, and the lesson studies, the research were actually done, and we were all present there. COVID, did affect, because imagine, okay, it's like I was doing the initial meetings with people I did not know. I had never met them. So I was simply meeting them online. Okay, we were accustomed to doing online meetings at that point, but still, the first time I met them face to face, it was a different world. So I could relate to them, we could discuss. So I think, yes, COVID did affect, especially during module 1, when it was done mostly online. We just met using Zoom. And even though we tried our best, I think that was a big problem.